Alan Christy is a history professor who specializes in Japan. He loves his work and feels privileged by the constant reminders it presents to value diversity, to adopt a global perspective, to discern, understand, and appreciate perspectives other than his own. This really goes to the University of California in Santa Cruz is an amazing research university, but it also provides all of its students with something beyond just the research and what you learn in the classroom. I can tell you I studied biology, nothing to do with public policy, planning, being the mayor of this fine town. However, what it gave to me was a perspective beyond myself, a perspective about giving back to the world, to our community, and it really does instill that in all of his students, and that's in part because of professors like Professor Christy. Alan's a gifted teacher who challenges his students to engage with history. He avoids prepackaged history. Instead, he provides primary source documents and encourages students to take charge. The son of a scientist whose library was filled with almost entirely history books, Alan is a passionate advocate of the humanities. We're lucky to have him here with us this evening. Professor Cruz.
Thank you. Wow, David is tackling cancer, and Terry is saving endangered species. So how's the historian going to step up to this, right? Well, my goal, thank you, my goal is nothing less than to bring peace to the world. So people say, why study the humanities today? And let me tell you why. Well, let me show you why. Let's start by looking at some pictures. What do you see here? Do these make you curious in any way? If I tell you these photos were taken in 1952, does that affect the way that you see these in any way? What if I tell you they were taken in Okinawa during the American military occupation of Japan by an American Army captain? With these two photos, I hope I've provoked you, but what comes next? Well, that's what I've asked my students in my seminar this quarter. This quarter, I've shared these photos and others with my students, and I said to them, what do you need to know to make sense of these? Start asking questions. So you see, as a teacher, my goal is to help my students see how they can make a difference in the world by acting in the real world right now, right? So let me tell you a little bit about these photos because there's a sweet local connection. They were taken by Army Captain Charles Eugene Gale. Dr. Gale was a dentist by trade and an avid and talented photographer by avocation. And while he was stationed in Okinawa in 1952, he roamed the countryside with his Leica camera. And through his lens, he developed a real affinity for the Okinawan people, capturing wonderful images of their relationships, of the work of daily life, and of a landscape that he may not have known was about to disappear beneath the blades of bulldozers, making way for a massive expansion of the American bases. So these photos capture a real specific moment in time. And they provide a portal to that time for my students here today, because these photos are right here in Santa Cruz. Captain Gale's daughter, Jerry Gale, who is here today, hi Jerry, recently donated these photos to the university, to special collections in McHenry Library. Jerry grew up with these photos, and these were her father's favorites. And when she gave the gift of these photos to the library, she hoped that they would engender a dialogue between two peoples who've been bound together in a complex relationship since 1945. But why do we still need this dialogue today, more than 65 years after the photos were taken? It's because of the relationship. So many of you may know that Okinawa was the site of the last horrific land battle in World War II. 12,000 American soldiers died there, and 65,000 Japanese soldiers perished. 122,000 Okinawan civilians were killed, 1/3 of the population. And when that devastating battle was over, the United States occupied the island and has never left. Now, for the United States, Okinawa is significantly strategic. It's the keystone of the Pacific. And although Okinawa was returned to Japanese rule in 1972, it remains home to 3/4 of all US bases in Japan. So it's a heavy burden. That's the red areas on that map are where American bases occupy the lands of Okinawa. Now, for Okinawans, for decades, they have campaigned vigorously for self-determination and for removal of the bases. For many Okinawans, living near the bases means danger, crime, pollution, accidents, or being potentially targeted in war. But there's also an appreciation of this relationship. During the Battle of Okinawa, Japanese forces often brutalized Okinawan civilians, and in many cases, American forces tried to help. So this is a rich and complex history. It's still vital, it's still pulsing. There's room for healing, and there's pain that can be eased. So the question is, how are my students stepping up to this? How are they responding? Brilliantly, I think. They're designing an interactive museum exhibit that will bring these photos to both sides and their human stories to both sides of the Pacific, starting here first in Santa Cruz at the Cessnon Gallery on campus, and then going to Okinawa to the Okinawan Prefectural Museum and Art Museum. This is an audacious plan. This is a seminar. But my students are risk takers. They like to do the big, crazy stuff, the wildly ambitious projects. You know, and that's how we do things here at UC Santa Cruz. Across the campus, professors open doors to deep, engaged, hands-on learning opportunities, and our students charge right through. This model of the classroom without walls, of support for paths of discovery, is deeply ingrained here at UC Santa Cruz, and it's one of the things that makes this such a gratifying place to teach. And for the students, the experience is transformational. It really changes their lives. So our endeavor, the Gale Project, begins with the photos themselves, which my students are poring over right now, generating research questions that will allow them to write the script, to find compelling stories, and to frame the exhibit. And when they look at these photos, the things they notice generate investigations. They're investigating questions of gender and labor, of religious beliefs, of economics, of public health issues, and ethnic identity. One of the most important things we're doing with the photos is using them to gather oral histories from Americans who were in Okinawa between 1945 and 1955. And as I'm sure all of you are aware, this is a dwindling number. So a quick appeal, if you know anybody, please let me know. I want to show these photos to them and get them to tell us their stories from the photos of what they remember, right? These oral histories will give us some of our most compelling voices for the exhibit when we go both here and when we go to Japan. And in the process of building this exhibit, my students are gaining a tremendous range of skills: research skills, writing, archival skills, database management, curation, web development, and even fundraising skills. Because these students know that in order to get this right, in order to get the full story, in order to actually be historians, which is what I'm asking them to be, they know that they have to travel to Okinawa. And I know that they'll do it because my students have done it before. So you see how this works. Instead of giving them a textbook or lecturing at them about the history of Okinawa, what I'm doing is I'm inviting them to generate their own understanding of Okinawan history by using primary sources like the kinds of things that they will encounter anywhere in the world after they graduate. And the work that they do in this, they won't be writing for me, their professor, but they'll be writing for a broad audience, a broad public audience that is both here in the United States and in Japan. And that gives their work a weightiness that they respond to. They feel that responsibility that comes when you have to share your work with the world outside the classroom. And this is real learning, and they get into the nitty-gritty of things. They learn history while creating budgets, overcoming language barriers, collaborating with each other and with a range of professionals, learning to negotiate laws and publishers and privacy rights. And they learn along the way that historical thinking is linked to a broad range of professions and activities. They learn that historical thinking can have an impact on the world. It can change the world. Because ultimately, this is about bringing people together. So before we're done, we're going to show these photos to Okinawans. And we're going to go hear their stories. And lucky for us, Okinawans live a very long time. The average life expectancy in Okinawa is 86 years. Rates of senility are amazingly low. And that means that many of the people in these photos are still alive today, of sound mind and body, and will come to the exhibit and we will meet them, right? That's an amazing thing. And so we're already reaching out to our colleagues in Okinawa, faculty and students, the media, museum professionals, working with newspapers, broadcasting stations to produce materials that will bring Okinawans to the exhibit and tell us their stories. And we're doing all this outreach so that when our exhibit, American Visions of Okinawa, the photographs of Charles Eugene Gale, arrives in Japan, we'll be there to hear their stories, to hear their perspectives, to learn the names of these people, and to dig through their historical documents and artifacts. And in doing that, we're going to engage in that dialogue that Jerry Gale was longing for when she gave us the gift. This is a dialogue that's built on that intense period when the post-war relationship between two peoples was forged, a dialogue that brings people together to listen, a dialogue for peace. Thank you.